Ray wiped his dirty hands on the old rag hanging from his belt. Dark spots of oil and grease covered his worn-out blue work uniform. The small nameplate on his chest simply read, Ray. He looked at the clock on the garage wall, 8:30 p.m. Another long day done. Finally, he muttered to himself, stretching his back that ached from bending over engines all day. Ray's auto shop wasn't fancy, but it was his. The small garage sat between a laundromat and a convenience store on the older side of town. Inside, the smell of motor oil, rubber, and coffee mixed together. Tools hung neatly on the walls, and 3 car lifts took up most of the space. In the tiny office, paperwork was stacked in neat piles. Ray might not have gone to college, but he ran a tight ship. Today had been extra busy. 6 oil changes, 2 brake jobs, 1 blown head gasket, and then, right when he was about to close up, the Cadillac had arrived. The beautiful old car had rolled up, making horrible grinding noises, smoke coming from under the hood. The owner, an older gentleman in a nice suit named Mr. Thompson, had looked desperate. "Please, son," he'd said. "I've got an important dinner tomorrow. My regular mechanic says he can't fit me in until next week. Someone told me you're the best with old cars." Ray couldn't say no. That's just who he was. While other shops turned people away at closing time, Ray always said, "If your car's in trouble, so are you." So he spent the next 4 hours rebuilding the transmission on the beautiful 1965 Cadillac DeVille. When Mr. Thompson returned to pick up his car, he was amazed. "She hasn't purred like this in years," the old man said, listening to the now smooth engine. "How much do I owe you?" Ray handed him the bill, which was lower than what most shops would charge for such a complex job. Mr. Thompson shook his head and pulled out his wallet. "This isn't enough." He handed Ray the payment plus an extra $100 bill. "For saving my dinner plans." Ray tried to refuse the tip. He never felt right taking extra money for just doing his job, but Mr. Thompson insisted. "If you won't take it as a tip, take it as dinner money," Mr. Thompson said with a wink. "There's this place called Bellissimo on 5th Avenue. Best Italian food in the city. You should treat yourself to a nice meal for once instead of those fast food burgers I see on your desk." Ray laughed. "Not sure fancy restaurants are really my thing." "Nonsense," Mr. Thompson replied. "Good food is for everyone. Just tell them Howard Thompson sent you." After Mr. Thompson left, Ray looked at the $100 bill in his hand. When was the last time he'd gone out for a nice meal? He couldn't remember. Usually dinner was whatever he could grab on the way home or whatever he could heat up in the microwave at his small apartment above the garage. "Why not?" he said to himself. "I deserve it after today." The small bathroom at the back of his shop wasn't much, but it had a shower that worked most days. Ray washed off the worst of the day's grime and looked at himself in the cracked mirror. At 34, his face showed the years of hard work, little wrinkles around his eyes from squinting at engines, strong hands rough from tools and chemicals. His dark hair was starting to get some gray at the temples. He didn't have fancy clothes at the shop, just a clean pair of jeans and a button-up plaid shirt that didn't have any holes or stains. He put them on, splashed on some of the aftershave his sister had given him last Christmas, and decided he looked decent enough. Not exactly GQ material, but clean at least, he joked to his reflection. The drive to 5th Avenue took him to a part of town he rarely visited. The streets were cleaner here, the buildings taller, the cars parked along the curb worth more than what he made in a year. He felt out of place in his 10-year-old pickup truck. When he found Bellissimo, he almost drove past it. The restaurant had a stone front with elegant gold lettering and soft lights that made it glow like something from a movie. Through the large windows, he could see people in suits and fancy dresses, sitting at tables with white tablecloths. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and waiters in black bow ties moved smoothly between tables. Ray parked his truck a block away and walked back, suddenly feeling nervous. As he approached the entrance, he noticed a few people in the outdoor waiting area giving him odd looks. He glanced down at himself. Clean jeans, clean shirt. Maybe not fancy, but definitely not dirty. "You can do this," he told himself. Mr. Thompson said the food was worth it. The entrance had 2 large, wooden doors with brass handles shaped like grapevines. When Ray pulled one open, Soft music and the smell of amazing food hit him. His stomach growled, reminding him that lunch had been a quick sandwich around noon. Just inside the door stood a thin man in a perfect black suit. He had slicked back hair and a little name tag that said, Antonio, maitre d'. The man looked Ray up and down with sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail. From Ray's slightly shaggy hair to his work boots that, despite his best efforts, still had traces of garage life on them. "Can I help you?" Antonio asked in a tone that clearly meant the opposite. Ray cleared his throat. "Table for one, please." Antonio raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" The way he said sir made it sound like an insult. "No," Ray replied, feeling more uncomfortable by the second. "I heard about this place today and thought I'd give it a try. Mr. Thompson, Howard Thompson, suggested I come here." "Mr. Thompson," Antonio repeated, though he showed no sign of recognition. He made a show of looking down at the tablet in his hands, scrolling through with a manicured finger. "I'm afraid we're fully booked tonight." Ray looked past him at the restaurant. While most tables were full, he could clearly see at least 3 empty ones. "Those tables look open," Ray said, pointing. Antonio's lips formed a tight smile that never reached his eyes. "Those are for guests with reservations who have yet to arrive." He paused, then added, "And for future reference, we maintain a certain standard of attire at Bellissimo." His eyes flicked to Ray's clothes. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the establishments downtown. The Lucky Diner serves food until midnight, I believe." Ray felt his face grow hot as a couple waiting nearby snickered. A woman in a sparkly dress whispered something to her companion, and they both glanced at Ray and laughed. He suddenly felt like a kid again, the poor boy from the wrong side of town who didn't belong. "Right," Ray said quietly. "Thanks anyway." He turned and walked out, feeling eyes on his back the whole way. Outside, the cool evening air hit his burning face. He stood there for a moment, the excitement of trying somewhere new replaced by a hollow feeling in his stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. As he walked back to his truck, the $100 bill felt heavy in his pocket. He'd use it for parts for the old Chevy he was fixing up instead. At least car parts never judged you by your clothes. The next morning, Ray arrived at his shop earlier than usual. Sleep hadn't come easy after the restaurant incident. He kept replaying the maitre d's cold smile in his mind, hearing the snickers from those fancy people. The whole thing left a bad taste in his mouth that even his morning coffee couldn't wash away. "No point dwelling on it," he muttered to himself as he unlocked the garage door. The familiar smell of motor oil and rubber greeted him like an old friend. This was his world. Here, people respected him for his skills, not his clothes. By 7:30, he was already underneath Mrs. Garcia's old Honda, fixing a leaky oil pan. The local elementary school teacher couldn't afford a new car on her salary, so Ray often charged her just enough to cover parts. Some might call it bad business, but Ray called it being human. He was so focused on his work that he didn't hear the car pull up outside. Only when the shop bell rang did he realize someone had come in. "Be with you in a minute," he called out, his voice echoing beneath the car. He quickly tightened the last bolt on the oil pan and slid out from under the Honda, wiping his hands on his rag. Standing in his shop was an elegant older woman, maybe in her 60s. She wore simple clothes, beige pants and a light blue blouse, but Ray could tell they were expensive. The kind of clothes that didn't need to be flashy to show quality. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her age, she stood straight and tall, with bright eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. What really caught Ray's attention, though, was the car she'd arrived in. A gorgeous vintage Alfa Romeo Spider convertible in a deep red color, the kind of car that made mechanics like him stop and stare. "Good morning," Ray said, suddenly aware of the grease stains on his uniform. "What can I help you with today?" The woman looked him up and down, but not in the dismissive way the restaurant people had. She looked at him like she was actually seeing him. "Are you the owner?" she asked with a slight accent that Ray couldn't quite place. "Italian, maybe?" "Yes, ma'am. Ray Wilson." He offered his cleanest finger for a handshake. To his surprise, she took his whole hand without hesitation, grease stains and all. "Elena Rossi," she said. My car is making a terrible noise. Started yesterday. My usual mechanic is on vacation for 2 weeks, and my friend Mrs. Lee said you might be able to help. She said you fixed her grandson's motorcycle when no one else could figure out what was wrong. Ray smiled. He remembered that motorcycle, a beautiful old Harley with a tricky electrical issue. Happy to take a look. What kind of noise is it making? Elena made a face. Like my grandmother when she cleared her throat. A rough, scratchy sound happens when I accelerate. Ray had to laugh at her description. Let's take a listen. He followed her outside to the Alfa Romeo. Up close, the car was even more beautiful. Clearly loved and well-maintained. This is a 1967 Alfa Romeo Spider, right? Ray asked, running a respectful hand over the hood. Elena looked surprised. Yes, most people don't know that. Ray nodded. My uncle had one when I was a kid. Not in this good condition, though. This is beautiful. A small smile crossed Elena's face. It was my husband's. He passed away 5 years ago. She patted the car's roof gently. This was his baby, now it's mine. The sadness in her voice was familiar to Ray. He had seen it many times. People who kept old cars running not because it made financial sense, but because the cars held memories of loved ones. Let's see what's bothering her then, Ray said. Softly, Elena handed him the keys and he started the engine. The car purred to life, but when he pressed the gas pedal, he immediately heard the scratchy noise Elena had described. His trained ear recognized it right away. I think I know what it is, he said, turning off the engine. Probably the timing belt. These older models. He popped the hood and confirmed his suspicion. Yep, the timing belt is starting to wear. It needs to be replaced before it breaks completely. Elena frowned. How serious is it? Can it be fixed today? I have an important meeting tomorrow. Ray scratched his chin. I can fix it today, but parts for these classics can be hard to come by. I might need to call around. Whatever it takes, Elena said firmly. Money is not a problem. Ray started making calls to his suppliers. After the 4th call, he found a place across town that had the right belt. They have it, but I'll need to go pick it up myself, he told Elena. I can wait, she said, settling into one of the plastic chairs in his small waiting area. Ray noticed she didn't look out of place there, despite her obvious wealth. Unlike those people at the restaurant last night, Elena seemed comfortable. Anywhere. There's coffee in the pot if you want some, Ray offered. It's not fancy, but it's hot. Perfect, Elena said, getting up to pour herself a cup. She added a little sugar and sat back down with a car magazine from his collection. While Ray waited for his assistant to arrive so he could go get the part, he worked on other jobs, conscious of Elena watching him. Not in a suspicious way, but with genuine interest. You work very efficiently, she commented after a while. No wasted movements. Ray smiled. Thanks. Been doing this since I was 16. Started in my dad's shop, then opened my own place when he retired. It shows, Elena said. My husband always said you can tell a true craftsman by how they move. He said amateurs rush, but professionals flow. When Ray's assistant Tommy finally arrived, Ray explained the situation and headed out to get the part. The drive across town gave him time to think. There was something about Elena that seemed familiar, though he was sure they'd never met before. When he returned with the part, he found Elena helping Tommy organize a shelf of filters. She had taken off her nice watch and rolled up her sleeves, looking completely at ease in the garage environment. You didn't have to help, Ray said, surprised. Elena shrugged. I got bored waiting. Tommy said these needed to be arranged by size. She smiled. I used to help my father in his business too. He believed idle hands were the devil's workshop. Ray got to work on her car right away, carefully removing the old timing belt and installing the new one. As he worked, Elena stood nearby, asking questions about what he was doing. Unlike most customers who just wanted to know how long it would take and how much it would cost, Elena seemed genuinely interested in the process. You remind me of my son, she said suddenly. He was good with his hands too. Ray looked up. Is he a mechanic as well? Elena's smile faded slightly. No, he was a chef, the best I've ever known. Her voice grew quieter. He passed away last year. Cancer. I'm sorry, Ray said, meaning it. The loss in her eyes was deep and real. He was only 42, Elena continued. Too young, but he lived his life doing what he loved, creating beautiful food for people to enjoy. She gazed at the car. This was his car too after my husband died. Now it's all I have left of both of them. Ray worked with even more care after that, treating the car with the respect it deserved as a cherished memory. By mid-afternoon, he had finished the job. He turned the key, and the engine started smoothly. No scratchy noise when he pressed the gas pedal. All done, he said, handing Elena the keys. Good as new. She took the keys and then reached for her purse. How much do I owe you? Ray wrote up the bill, charging her less than his usual rate. She raised an eyebrow when she saw the total. This seems low for such specialized work, Ray shrugged. The part wasn't as expensive as I thought it might be. Elena looked at him for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. She wrote out a check for the amount and handed it to him. You know, she said as Ray walked her to her car, you did in 3 hours what my regular mechanic would have taken 3 days to do, and you treated this car like it matters because you understood it matters to me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small card. If you ever need anything at all, please call me. Ray took the card. It was simple but elegant, cream-colored with raised lettering that simply read, Elena Rossi, and a phone number. Thank you for your help today, Ray, she said, getting into her car. People who care about their work are becoming rare these days. As she drove away, Ray looked down at the card again. He couldn't explain why, but he had a feeling that meeting Elena Rossi was important somehow, as if their paths were meant to cross. 2 weeks passed, and Ray had almost forgotten about Elena Rossi and her vintage Alfa Romeo. The garage had been busier than ever. A hailstorm the previous weekend had damaged dozens of cars in town, and Ray's phone hadn't stopped ringing. He'd even had to call in a buddy from his dad's old shop to help handle all the work. By Friday, Ray was running on nothing but coffee and determination. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, and his back ached from long hours bent over dented hoods and broken windshields. He'd just sent Tommy home early. The kid had worked just as hard as Ray all week when his cell phone rang. Ray glanced at the screen, not recognizing the number. He almost didn't answer. The thought of another customer with hail damage made him want to throw the phone across the room. But years of being a small business owner had trained him never to ignore a call. It might be the one that keeps the lights on. Ray's auto shop, he answered, trying to keep the exhaustion out of his voice. Ray? It's Elena Rossi. You fixed my Alfa Romeo 2 weeks ago. Ray perked up a little, surprised to hear from her. Ms. Rossi, yes, how's the car running? The car was perfect until this morning, she said, sounding stressed. Now it won't start at all. Nothing happens when I turn the key. I hate to bother you, but I have an important meeting across town in 3 hours and I really need to get there. My regular mechanic is still away, and the dealership said they couldn't send anyone until Monday. Ray rubbed his eyes. What he needed was a shower and about 12 hours of sleep, not another job. But something in Elena's voice, a note of genuine distress, made it impossible to say no. Where are you? He asked, already grabbing his emergency toolkit. Elena gave him an address in Oakwood Heights, the fanciest neighborhood in the Yao City. Of course she lived there. Ray scribbled down the details. I'll be there in about 20 minutes, he promised. Thank you, Ray. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. After locking up the shop, Ray climbed into his old pickup truck. The contrast between his vehicle and where he was heading wasn't lost on him. Oakwood Heights was home to doctors, lawyers, and business executives, people who probably ate at places like Bellissimo every night without a second thought. The drive took him through parts of town that grew progressively nicer. The houses got bigger, the lawns greener, the cars more expensive. By the time he turned onto Elena's street, Ray felt like he'd crossed into another world. The homes here weren't just houses, they were estates, with long driveways and security gates. When he pulled up to the address Elena had given him, Ray double-checked the number to make sure he had the right place. The house, more like a mansion, was an elegant two-story building with stone columns and perfectly trimmed hedges. It wasn't the biggest on the street, but it screamed old money and good taste. Ray parked his truck at the curb, grabbed his tools, and walked up to the front door. Before he could ring the bell, the door opened and Elena stood there looking relieved to see him. "That was quick," she said. "Thank you for coming. The car's in the garage this way." She led him around the side of the house to a detached 3-car garage. Inside was the Alfa Romeo, along with a new-looking Mercedes SUV and an empty space, where a third car would normally park. Ray got right to work checking the battery first. "When did you last drive it?" he asked, testing the connections. 2 days ago, Elena replied, watching him work. It was fine then. After a quick inspection, Ray found the problem: a loose battery connection that had corroded slightly. He cleaned the terminal and reconnected it properly. "Try it now," he said, stepping back. Elena turned the key and the engine purred to life immediately. "That's it?" she asked, surprised. "Just a loose wire?" Ray nodded. "Battery connection. Simple. Fix. These old cars vibrate a lot, so sometimes the connections work themselves loose." Elena looked at her watch and sighed with relief. "You've saved me again. I have just enough time to change and make it to my meeting." She shut off the car and turned to Ray. "You must be hungry. Have you had lunch?" Ray suddenly realized he hadn't eaten anything since a granola bar at dawn. His stomach growled on cue, making them both laugh. "I'll take that as a no." Elena smiled. "Please, come inside. The least I can do is feed you before you drive all the way back." Too tired to argue, Ray followed her into the house. The interior was just as impressive as the outside. High ceilings, expensive furniture, artwork on the walls, but it felt surprisingly homey. Family photos lined the hallway, and the furniture, while clearly high quality, looked comfortable and well used. Elena led him to a large kitchen with gleaming granite countertops and professional-grade appliances. "Sit," she instructed, pointing to a stool at the island. "Coffee first, then food." As she moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, Ray noticed how at home she seemed here. This wasn't just a fancy house, it was clearly her space. "So," Ray said, accepting a mug of the best-smelling coffee he'd ever encountered, "what's this important meeting about, if you don't mind me asking?" Elena paused in the middle of pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "It's with my lawyer," she said with a sigh. "I'm selling my business." "What business are you in?" Ray asked, sipping the coffee. It tasted even better than it smelled. "Restaurants," Elena replied, setting a cutting board on the counter and beginning to slice bread. "My family has been in the restaurant business for 3 generations. My father started with a little cafe when he first came to this country. From Italy. By the time he died, he had 3 restaurants. My husband and I expanded to 6, though we've sold 2 over the years." She worked as she talked, layering sliced prosciutto, fresh mozzarella, tomatoes, and basil onto the bread. "After my son died last year, I lost heart for it. He was supposed to take over, now it's time to let go." She placed a plate in front of Ray with the sandwich and some olives on the side. It looked simple but perfect. "This looks amazing," Ray said sincerely. "Thank you." Elena waved away his thanks. "It's nothing fancy, just good ingredients." Ray took a bite and had to stop himself from groaning in pleasure. It was possibly the best sandwich he'd ever tasted. "So how many restaurants do you still have?" he asked between bites. 4, Elena said, making a smaller sandwich for herself. "The flagship is Bellissimo on 5th Avenue. That was my son's pride. He was the head chef there until he got sick." Ray choked mid-swallow. "Bellissimo? On 5th Avenue?" He repeated, his voice suddenly hoarse. Elena nodded. "You know it?" Ray set down his sandwich slowly, his appetite suddenly gone. "I went there a couple weeks ago, or tried to. They wouldn't let me in." "What do you mean they wouldn't let you in?" Elena's voice turned sharp. Ray felt his face grow warm with the memory. "The guy at the door, tall guy with slicked back hair, said they were full. But I could see empty tables. Then he made some comment about my clothes not meeting their standards. Elena's expression changed from surprise to anger as Ray spoke. By the time he finished, her eyes were flashing with barely contained fury. "Antonio," she said, the name coming out like a curse, "the maitre d'. I hired him myself on my son's recommendation." She shook her head. "My son would be heartbroken to hear this. That is not how we built our business. Not how my father taught us to treat people." She placed her hands flat on the counter as if steadying herself. "My father came to this country with nothing but the clothes on his back. He worked as a dishwasher at a restaurant where they wouldn't let Italians eat at the tables. For service only, they told him. When he finally saved enough to open his own place, he swore everyone would be welcome as long as they came with respect and hunger." Elena looked up at Ray, something new in her expression, determination. "Ray, I need to go to Bellissimo, now, and I want you to come with me." Ray blinked in surprise. "Now? But what about your meeting with the lawyer?" Elena was already reaching for her phone. "I'll reschedule. This is more important. My son's legacy is being corrupted, and I need to see it with my own eyes." She dialed a number and spoke briefly to someone, canceling her appointment. When she hung up, she looked at Ray with the intensity of someone on a mission. "Will you come with me? I need a witness, someone who experienced this firsthand." Ray thought about his exhaustion, the pile of work waiting at the shop, the sleep he desperately needed. Then he thought about Antonio's smug face, the snickering couple, the humiliation he'd felt walking out of Bellissimo. "I'll come," he said firmly, "but I should probably clean up first." He gestured to his work clothes, still spotted with grease and dirt from the garage. Elena shook her head. "No, go exactly as you are. I want to see how they react." A small, determined smile crossed her face. "Sometimes, Ray, people need to be reminded of where they came from and what really matters in this world." The drive to Bellissimo was mostly silent. Ray followed Elena's Mercedes in his pickup truck, still trying to process everything. The woman whose car he'd fixed owned the very restaurant that had turned him away. It felt like something out of a movie, not real life. They arrived just after 6 in the evening. The restaurant was beginning to fill with the dinner crowd, men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, all looking like they belonged to a world Ray had only glimpsed from the outside. He parked his truck behind Elena's car and got out, suddenly very aware of his dirty work clothes, the grease under his fingernails, the logo on his shirt that read Ray's Auto Shop, with a cartoon wrench. Elena, on the other hand, looked every bit the successful business owner in her simple but elegant outfit. "Ready?" she asked, waiting for him on the sidewalk. Ray took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." Together they walked toward the entrance of Bellissimo. Through the windows, Ray could see the same crystal chandeliers, the same white tablecloths, the same air of exclusivity that had intimidated him 2 weeks ago. But this time he wasn't alone. Elena pushed open the heavy wooden door with surprising force, and Ray followed her inside. The restaurant was humming with conversation and the clinking of glasses. Soft classical music played in the background, and waiters in black bow ties moved smoothly between the tables. Standing at his podium near the entrance was Antonio, the maitre d' who had turned Ray away. He looked exactly as Ray remembered. Tall, thin, with perfectly slicked back hair and a suit that probably cost more than all the clothes in Ray's closet combined. Antonio's eyes widened slightly when he saw Elena. He immediately straightened, his already perfect posture, and put on a wide smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Madame Rossi," he exclaimed, stepping out from behind his podium. "What a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you this evening." His gaze slid over to Ray, then quickly back to Elena, as if Ray wasn't worth acknowledging. "Your usual table is currently occupied, but I can have it ready in—" "Antonio," Elena interrupted, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through his practiced speech. "This gentleman was turned away from my restaurant 2 weeks ago. Do you remember him?" Antonio's eyes flicked to Ray again, this time with a flash of recognition. His smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. Madam, I'm not sure, he was turned away. Elena continued, her voice rising just enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Because of how he was dressed. Is this correct? Antonio paled slightly as he looked between Elena and Ray. Realization dawning in his eyes. Madame Rossi, we have certain standards that we maintain. It's what makes Bellissimo special. Your son always insisted, do not speak of my son, Elena said, each word precise and cutting. My son would never turn away a hard-working person because of dirt under their fingernails or because they didn't arrive in a fancy car. By now, conversations at the nearest tables had died down. People were watching the scene unfold, some with open curiosity, others pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. Perhaps we could discuss this in private, Antonio suggested, his professional smile now completely gone. No, Elena said firmly. I think everyone here should hear this. She turned slightly, addressing not just Antonio but the watching customers, and staff as well. My father was a mechanic in Naples before he saved enough money to open his first cafe. His hands were never clean. There was always grease under his nails, engine oil on his clothes. But his heart was good, and his food made people happy. She reached out and took Ray's arm, pulling him forward slightly. This man fixed my car today. He dropped everything to help me when I called. He works with his hands just like my father did, and he takes pride in doing honest work. And yet he was told he wasn't good enough to eat in my restaurant. Antonio's face had gone from pale to red. Madame Rossi, I assure you, when my father opened his first restaurant, Elena continued, ignoring Antonio's attempt to speak, he had one rule above all others. We judge the food, not the diner. That rule has guided our family business for 3 generations. Her voice became even more resolute. Until today, I thought it still did. She turned to face the entire restaurant. Most people were openly watching now, some looking uncomfortable, others intrigued by the drama. I came here tonight to tell you all something important, Elena said. I was going to sell this restaurant. After my son died, I lost my passion for the business, but now, she paused, her eyes scanning the room. Now I see that his vision has been lost. The soul of what we built is fading away. Ray stood awkwardly, beside her, unsure what to do. He'd never been the center of attention like this, and part of him wanted to disappear. But another part, the part that had felt the sting of rejection, felt a strange satisfaction at seeing Antonio squirm. Elena's gaze returned to Antonio. You're fired, she said simply. Clear out your things tonight. Antonio's mouth fell, open. But Madame Rossi, I've been here for 5 years. Your son himself hired me. Yes, Elena nodded. And he would be the first to show you the door for forgetting what matters. She gestured to one of the other staff members, a woman in her 40s who had been watching the scene with a hand over her mouth. Lisa, you're in charge until I find a replacement. The woman named Lisa looked shocked but nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Antonio stood frozen for a moment, then his face hardened. This is ridiculous. You can't fire me because I maintain the standards of this establishment. Elena stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried through the now silent restaurant. I'm not firing you because you upheld standards. I'm firing you because you forgot the most important standard of all, respect for every person who walks through that door. She turned away from him, dismissing him completely. Addressing the room again, she said, I apologize to everyone for this disruption. Your meals tonight are on the house. Consider it my way of asking your forgiveness for what this place has become. A murmur ran through the restaurant at this announcement, while Antonio stood rigid with disbelief. You can't do this, he sputtered. You can't just... I just did, Elena said, not even turning to look at him. Now please leave before you embarrass yourself further. For a moment it seemed like Antonio might argue more, but something in Elena's posture, the absolute certainty she projected, seemed to finally get through to him. With a last glare at Ray, he stalked off toward the back of the restaurant. Then did Elena's shoulders relax slightly. She turned to Ray with a tired smile. I'm sorry you had to be part of this scene, but thank you for coming with me. Ray shook his head, still processing what he'd just witnessed. That was intense. Elena laughed softly. My husband used to say I was like a volcano, quiet for years, then suddenly, she made an explosive gesture with her hands. As the restaurant gradually returned to its normal hum of conversation, Elena led Ray to a small table in the corner, one with a perfect view of both the kitchen and the dining room. This was my son's favorite spot, she explained as they sat down. He could see everything from here. A nervous waiter approached, clearly unsure how to treat them after the scene they'd just caused. Thomas, Elena said gently, recognizing him. Please bring us whatever the chef recommends tonight, and some of the Barolo my son liked. Yes, Madame Rossi, right away. The young man hurried off toward the kitchen. Elena looked around the restaurant, her eyes taking in every detail as if seeing it for the first time. I haven't been here in months, she admitted. Not since my son. She turned her gaze to Ray. Thank you for helping me see what was happening in my absence. Ray shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I didn't really do anything. You did more than you know, Elena said softly. She raised her water glass. To new beginnings. Ray raised his glass and clinked it against hers, still not entirely sure how he'd ended up here in this fancy restaurant, sitting across from its owner, but strangely glad that he had. 3 months passed quickly. Ray's garage stayed busy, but the memory of that night at Bellissimo remained vivid in his mind. He'd thought about calling Elena a few times, just to check in, but always talked himself out of it. After all, what would he say? Hey, remember when you fired your maitre d' and gave away thousands of dollars in free meals because of me? It seemed better to leave things as they were, a strange but memorable chapter in his otherwise ordinary life. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, a cream-colored envelope arrived in Ray's mail. It stood out immediately among the bills and flyers. His name and address were written in elegant handwriting on the front. Inside was a beautiful card with gold lettering that read, You are cordially invited to the grand reopening of Bellissimo Restaurant. Friday, 7 p.m., black tie optional. A handwritten note at the bottom said, You helped me remember what matters. Please come as my honored guest. Elena. Ray stared at the invitation for a long time. Part of him wanted to go, to see what had changed, to see Elena again. Another part felt nervous at the thought of returning to a place that had once made him feel so unwelcome. Would he really fit in even now? That evening he called his sister for advice. You have to go, she said immediately after he explained the situation. This woman fired someone who was rude to you. She's basically transformed her restaurant. Because of what happened, the least you can do is show up. But it says black tie optional, Ray pointed out. I don't own a suit, let alone a tuxedo. His sister laughed. Then we're going shopping this weekend, no arguments. That Saturday, for the first time since his cousin's wedding 10 years ago, Ray found himself in a men's clothing store, being measured for a suit. His sister insisted on the works: suit, tie, new shoes, even cufflinks. This is too much, Ray protested as she held up different ties against the dark blue suit the salesman had recommended. Think of it as an investment, she said. Every man needs one good suit. You never know when you'll need to look your best. When Ray tried on the finished outfit in front of the store's three-way mirror, he barely recognized himself. The man staring back at him looked confident, professional, like someone who wouldn't get turned away from any restaurant. See, his sister said, adjusting his tie. Same Ray, just in better packaging. The night of the reopening, Ray parked his truck a block away from Bellissimo. He'd considered getting his truck washed for the occasion, but decided against it. Clean or dirty, it was still a 10-year-old pickup, and he wasn't going to pretend to be someone he wasn't. As he walked toward the restaurant, he noticed changes right away. The outside had been repainted in warmer colors. The windows were larger and brighter, offering a clear view inside. Most noticeably, the heavy wooden doors had been replaced, with glass ones that seemed to say, Come in, see what we're about. Taking a deep breath, Ray pulled open one of the glass doors and stepped inside. He was immediately struck by how different the place felt. The chandeliers were still there, but they now hung over a space that felt welcoming rather than intimidating. The lighting was warmer, the tables were spaced to encourage conversation rather than whispers, and the staff moved with relaxed efficiency rather than stiff formality. Most surprising was the mix of people. There were still men in expensive suits and women in cocktail dresses, but Ray also spotted people in more casual clothes, nice jeans and button-ups, colorful dresses, even a few folks who looked like they might have come straight from work. Ray. He turned to see Elena making her way toward him. She looked different too, more vibrant somehow, dressed in a simple but elegant red dress that made her silver hair shine. She was smiling broadly, and Ray couldn't help but smile back. "You came," she said, reaching for his hands. "And look at you, so handsome in your suit." Ray felt his face warm. "My sister made me buy it. Said I needed to have one good outfit." "Smart woman, your sister?" Elena laughed. "Come, let me show you what we've done." She led him through the restaurant, stopping to introduce him to staff and other guests. Ray was surprised to find that several of the waiters remembered him from that night 3 months ago. The mechanic, they called him, but with respect rather than mockery. The whole place had been transformed. The white tablecloths remained, but they were now accompanied by colorful place settings and fresh flowers. The walls, once blank and imposing, now featured photographs, some of food and wine, but many, showing people cooking together, eating together, celebrating together. "That's my father," Elena said, pointing to a black and white photo of a young man in work clothes standing proudly in front of a small cafe. His hands were always stained with engine grease. He used to joke that he seasoned his food with motor oil. In another corner was a collection of photos of a young man in chef's whites. "My son," Elena said softly. These were from when he first became head chef here. As they completed their tour, Ray noticed one wall near the entrance that held only a single frame. Inside was a simple quote written in both Italian and English. "We judge the meal, not the diner." "That's our new motto," Elena explained. "It's on all our menus, our website, even our receipts now." She led Ray to a special table set up near the kitchen, not hidden away but positioned so diners could watch the chefs at work through a large window. "This is the chef's table," Elena said. "My son started this tradition. Each night we invite one guest or group to dine here and experience the heart of the restaurant. Tonight, that's you." Ray felt honored but confused. "Why me?" he asked. "You barely know me." Elena smiled. "Because sometimes we need someone from outside our world to help us see what's right in front of us. You did that for me, Ray. You helped me remember why my family started this business in the first place." As they sat down, a waiter brought them 2 glasses of wine. "To new beginnings," Elena said, raising her glass. "To seeing people for who they are, not what they wear," Ray replied, raising his. They clinked glasses, and Ray took a sip of what was probably the fanciest wine he'd ever tasted. He was about to comment on it when he noticed Elena watching him with a thoughtful expression. "What?" he asked, self-consciously. "I've been thinking," she said, setting down her glass. "I've made a lot of changes to Bellissimo these past 3 months. New look, new menu, new staff. But the biggest change has been in how I think about the business." Ray nodded, not sure where she was going with this. "The thing is," Elena continued, "I've discovered I still love the restaurant business. I don't want to sell anymore. But I'm 67 years old, Ray. I need to think about the future." She took a deep breath. "I've been watching how you run your shop, how you treat your customers, how you take pride in your work, how you never turn away someone in need even when you're exhausted. It reminds me of how my father ran his first restaurant." Ray felt a strange tingle of anticipation. "Elena, what are you saying?" "I need a business partner, Ray. Someone who understands that true quality isn't about fancy clothes or expensive cars. It's about treating people right and giving them your best, no matter who they are." Ray stared at her in disbelief. "But, I don't know anything about restaurants. Elena laughed. And I don't know anything about cars, but we both know about people, and that's what matters most in any business. But why me? Ray asked again. You could find someone with experience, someone who would turn away a hard-working man because his hands have grease under the nails? Elena interrupted. No, thank you. I'd rather have someone who understands the values this place was built on. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just think about it. Come by the restaurant a few times, see how it works. If you're interested, we can talk details. If not, no hard feelings. Ray nodded slowly, still stunned by the offer. I'll think about it, he promised. As the first course arrived at their table, Ray looked around at the bustling restaurant, at the happy faces of the diners, at the elegant woman across from him who had seen something in him that others had missed. Whatever he decided about Elena's offer, he knew one thing for certain. He would never again doubt his right to walk through any door anywhere. You know, he said as they began to eat, my sister's going to think I planned this whole thing just to prove I needed that suit. Elena's laughter rang out, bright and genuine, and Ray couldn't help but join in. From being turned away at the door to being offered a partnership in the same establishment, life sure had a funny way of working out sometimes.